I'm joined by Mr. Adam Posen in Washington, D.C. He's the president of the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Sir, it is an honor for us to have you with us at this hour. Welcome to CGTN. Let's talk about the Biden presidency. U.S. President Joe Biden has finished his first year in office amid, Omicron. To paraphrase Dickens, we could say this is the best of times and this is the worst of times. Because on the positive side, we look at the economics, 6.4 jobs have been added in the U.S. Consumer demand is strong, wages are up, and the stock market is thriving. If you look at S&P 500 last year, gaining some 20 to 30%, which is very high. But inflation climbed to 7% in 2021, and supply chain challenges are very obvious as we know it. As an economist, would you say the glass is half empty or half full about the U.S. economy?
I'd say it's more than half full right now. The inflation will be dealt with. It needs to be dealt with because it's no longer just about bottlenecks or short supply. When you come back, it's now a more general inflation trend. So it has to be the Federal Reserve tightening policy to deal with it. And I think that makes inflation makes President Biden much more unpopular than he otherwise would be. I think the state of the U.S. economy going forward, like the state of the Chinese economy going forward, is pretty strong and robust. There are inequality issues that have to be taken on, but the broad stability is possible. What is sad in both U.S. and China is that our productivity trends are down. We're not getting as much out of our technology and investment or our workers as we should be. And that's in both sides made worse by the U.S.-China conflict.
Right. Let's talk about inflation. Joe Biden said soaring prices will be a transitory phenomenon brought about by supply chain issues. However, the prices of goods and services in the U.S. have continued to rise at rates unseen in decades. Will we see a tightening of quantitative easing and a rise in interest rates? How should the Fed address this question?
Well, I and some of my Peterson Institute colleagues a year ago were forecasting that inflation would last longer and be higher than either the Fed or Reserve or the Biden administration were saying. We took no pleasure in it, but that was the reality. And so when we look at what's going on now, it isn't just that we had these supply chain issues or people spending so much once they got the economy reopened and the economy couldn't react. Those were indeed transitory, but they take longer and workers had to readjust. There were pushes for higher wages, pushes for different job conditions, and that takes time. That takes a couple of years to adjust. So nothing's going to make inflation go away overnight. But the Federal Reserve does have to tighten its monetary policy in order to get the general trend down once we're through all these transitory factors. And so that means that they're going to be tightening on the quantity side, and much more importantly, they'll be raising interest rates starting in March or April.
Mr. Posen, you talk about the fact that there needs to be a greater China-U.S. collaboration. But do you think President Joe Biden has the political space to do that when you think about, the stalled infrastructure plan, thanks to Senator Manchin, the Voting Bill Act, his historically low supporting approval ratings, according to multiple polls, and then the midterm elections coming up later this year. Also, there are politics here in China. I'm not going to lie. So do you think, President Joe Biden and the two sides really have the political space to do the right thing?
I think they have constraints, as you rightly point out, and they are on both sides. There are nationalist or isolationist people worrying about self-reliance, people worrying about an enemy economy in both countries. I think the way forward is twofold. First, the U.S. and China, and I think President Xi and President Biden see this, need to pick a few issues that are either not so sensitive or which people understand are for the good of the world. Obviously, climate change is the biggest one. Making sure that there's good relationships over emergencies and no misunderstandings on military is another one. Economically, we have a successful regime in the central banking exchange rate sphere. The conflicts over yuan dollar that we had a decade ago have largely gone away because of concerted efforts. So I think picking a few areas to work on is the way forward. The second thing is to recognize that trade gets a lot of the political sensitivity, but investment, cross-border, and technological exchange are the bigger, more important things. And we need to work on ways that we can trust each other on investment and technology.
All right, thanks so much for your insight. We have with us Mr. Adam Posen, President of the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Sir, thank you so much for your insight. Come back again, please.
Thank you for having me on CGTN.